I didn't see her when we were filming. None of us did. That's the part people never believe. They always ask how a little girl in a bright red dress could stand so close to us on a mountain trail without anyone noticing. They ask how she appeared in the background of our videos, sometimes only a few steps behind my grandmother, sometimes hidden between the trees, as if she had always been there. I used to ask those same questions. Then I went back to that mountain. Now I understand. Some things are invisible until it's already too late. Our family trip to central Taiwan was supposed to be simple. My grandmother had just turned 73, and my uncle wanted to take her back to a mountain trail she used to visit when she was younger. It wasn't a tourist destination. There were no crowds, no gift shops, no colorful signs. Just an old road, a small parking area, and a narrow trail disappearing into the forest. There were 7 of us. My uncle carried his camcorder like always. He recorded everything: birthdays, family dinners, even arguments. He believed memories disappeared if you trusted your brain instead of a camera. My grandmother walked slowly at the front, with my aunt beside her. My cousins ran ahead, laughing and throwing leaves at each other. I stayed near the back. I was 19, and honestly, I thought the whole trip was going to be boring. At first, the forest was beautiful. Thick green trees surrounded us, mist drifted between the branches, and insects hummed somewhere out of sight. Every now and then the trail opened, revealing distant blue mountains beneath a cloudy sky. But after about an hour, everything changed. Nobody mentioned it, yet we all felt it. The air became colder. The trail seemed much longer than my grandmother remembered. The birds stopped singing. Even my younger cousins fell silent and stayed close to the adults. My uncle tried to lighten the mood by pointing the camera at us. "Everyone smile," he joked. "If we get lost, at least we'll have proof." Nobody laughed. A little later, my grandmother suddenly stopped walking. She turned toward the trees, as though someone had called her name. "There are children here," she whispered. My uncle frowned. "What children?" She blinked, looked confused, then quietly shook her head. "Nothing. I thought I heard children." We all listened. There were no voices, no footsteps, only the wind moving through the leaves. We should have turned back then. Instead, we kept walking. About 20 minutes later, we discovered an old shrine almost swallowed by moss and roots. Faded red ribbons hung from nearby branches. Rotting fruit sat on the altar beside burned-out incense sticks. The moment my grandmother saw it, her expression changed. "Don't touch anything," she warned. But my younger cousin Leo had already picked up one of the ribbons. She slapped it out of his hand so quickly that everyone froze. "Don't take what belongs to them," she said. My uncle forced a nervous laugh. "Mum, it's just a ribbon." She looked straight at him, fear filling her eyes. "No," she whispered, "not here." That was the first time I felt it. Not fear, just the overwhelming feeling that someone was watching us from beyond the trees. A few minutes later, my uncle filmed us as we walked back through thick fog rolling across the trail. That's when she appeared. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing directly behind my grandmother. She wore a bright red dress that should have stood out against the gray forest. Her long black hair covered most of her face, and her arms rested silently at her sides. She was so close that if my grandmother had taken one step backward, she would have touched her. But none of us reacted. Nobody turned around. Nobody screamed. Nobody even paused. We simply kept walking. Later, when people watched the footage online, they froze the frame, brightened the image, and circled the little girl in red. Some claimed it was fake. Others insisted it was just a trick of the light. But I was there, and I know what was behind my grandmother. Nothing. At least, nothing we were able to see. We made it back to the car just before sunset. Everyone looked exhausted. My grandmother kept rubbing her chest, saying she felt strangely cold. My uncle joked that the mountain had defeated us. We laughed it off, drove home, and tried to forget the uneasy feeling that had followed us out of the forest. None of us realized The mountain had already come home with us. Hashtag, The Girl in the Red Dress, Part 2. That night, my uncle called my mother while she was washing dishes. "What do you mean there's a child?" she asked, her voice suddenly tense. He had been transferring the camcorder footage to his computer when he noticed something strange. At first, he thought one of my cousins had wandered behind my grandmother, but both of them were clearly visible in front of the camera. He rewound the footage. The little girl was still there. He checked another clip. She appeared again, then another, and another, always standing in the background. Always closer to my grandmother than anyone else. By midnight, our entire family was gathered around my uncle's computer, watching the recordings in complete silence. In one clip, a flash of red appeared between two trees. In another, the little girl stood beside the old shrine. Every time we tried to pause on her face, it blurred. Only the bright red dress stayed perfectly clear. Then came the footage filmed in the fog. My grandmother walked slowly toward the camera. Behind her, the little girl walked too. But something was wrong. She didn't move like a child. Her body barely shifted. It looked as though something invisible was pulling her forward. My uncle paused the video. The girl stood behind my grandmother with her head lowered. Then, the frozen image flickered. Just once. Her head lifted slightly. My uncle jumped back from the desk. "It moved," my aunt whispered. He insisted it was only a computer glitch, but he never played the video again. The next morning, my grandmother became seriously ill. She developed a fever, refused to eat, and kept repeating the same sentence in her sleep. She followed me home. Doctors couldn't explain what was wrong. 3 nights later, she woke up screaming, pointing into the corner of her bedroom. "Don't let her stand there," she cried. "Don't let her look at me." The room was empty, but when she grabbed my wrist, her hand was freezing cold. "She wants me to go back," she whispered. The girl in red. After that, strange things began happening around the house. A child, laughing in empty rooms. Tiny, wet footprints in the hallway. Red thread tied around door handles. The smell of damp forest leaves drifting through closed windows. Then my uncle decided to delete the footage, but when he opened the folder, every file had vanished. Later that night, he discovered a new video on his phone. It had been recorded at 3:17 a.m. The camera showed the hallway outside his bedroom. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, tap, tap, tap. A small, pale hand knocked on his bedroom door. Moments later, a little girl stepped into view. Bright red dress, long black hair. This time, her face wasn't blurred. Her skin looked gray and swollen. Her eyes were almost completely black. Then she smiled, not happily. Like she recognized us, like she had finally found our home. My uncle sent the video to our family group. Then, he disappeared. Police found his house locked from the inside. His car was still outside. His shoes were by the front door. But muddy child-sized footprints led from his bedroom and ended at a blank wall. A week later, I received a message from my uncle's phone. There was no text, only a photo of the old mountain shrine. At the edge of the picture stood my uncle, holding hands with the girl in the red dress. Then another message arrived. Just 3 words. "Bring her back." I couldn't ignore the message. My grandmother was dying, my uncle was missing, and every night the girl in the red dress came closer in my dreams. So I went back to the mountain. I wasn't alone. 2 of my friends came with me. We carried a flashlight, my phone, and a small bag of offerings my mother had prepared. Fruit, incense, and red envelopes. She believed we needed to apologize for disturbing the old shrine. When we reached the trail, everything felt different. The trees seemed closer. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. As we walked deeper, we found red ribbons tied to the branches. At first, there was one, then another. Soon they were everywhere. Unlike before, these ribbons looked fresh, bright, almost new. Some of them were still wet. Then my phone lost signal. My flashlight began flickering, and somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. One of my friends, June, whispered, "We should leave." I agreed. But when we turned around, the trail was gone. Not hidden, gone. Only endless trees stood behind us. Then we saw her. A little girl in a bright red dress stood silently between the trees. Her head was lowered, her long black hair covering most of her face. In one hand, she held a red ribbon. In the other, she held my uncle's camcorder. I wanted to run. Instead, I remembered my grandmother's warning. I placed the offerings on the ground and bowed my head. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "We never meant to disturb you. Please let my grandmother go. Please bring my uncle home." The girl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were completely black. Then she spoke. But it wasn't her voice. It was my uncle's. "You filmed her." My blood ran cold. Then she smiled. "You brought her home." Behind her, shapes began appearing between the trees. Children, dozens of them, every one of them wearing red. June screamed and ran. He took only a few steps before the fog swallowed him. He didn't disappear behind it. He simply vanished. Wei grabbed my arm, begging me to run. But the little girl raised the camcorder. Its red recording light switched on. Suddenly, I heard my grandmother's voice. "She chooses who remembers." The girl pointed first at me, then at the shrine. That was when I understood. She didn't want our offerings. She didn't want an apology. She wanted the memory. Every person who replayed that video, every person who searched for her face, had invited her into their lives. Somehow, the missing video had returned to my phone. I opened it. There we were, walking along the mountain trail, and behind my grandmother stood the girl in red. Only this time, she was staring directly into the camera, at me. I placed my phone on the shrine, picked up a large rock, and whispered, "I won't remember you." Then, I smashed the phone. Again and again, until the screen went completely black. The forest exploded with screams, children crying, women wailing, voices rising from beneath the ground. The fog rushed toward us like a wave. The last thing I saw was the girl in the red dress standing beside the shrine. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide. Her black eyes locked onto mine. Then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. I was lying in the parking area at the edge of the mountain. Wei was beside me, unconscious but alive. June was gone. The trail looked completely normal. There were no red ribbons, no old shrine, no sign that anything strange had ever happened. When we returned home, my grandmother's fever had finally broken. She opened her eyes for the first time in days. A few days later, my uncle was found wandering barefoot near a river 2 towns away. He was alive, but he couldn't remember where he had been or how he got there. June was never found. The police called it a hiking accident. My family never spoke about the mountain again. For years, I tried to forget everything. I refused to watch old family videos. I avoided hiking trails. I deleted any photograph that looked even slightly strange. I convinced myself it was over. But memories don't disappear. They wait. Last month, my cousin called me. He had been organizing old family files when he found an old video in a forgotten folder. The file name was simple: Mountain Trip. I told him not to open it. I begged him to delete it. He laughed and said I was overreacting. A few minutes later, he sent me a screenshot. It showed my grandmother walking along the trail, my uncle holding the camcorder, me standing at the back of the group, and behind me, half hidden between the trees, stood the girl in the red dress. But something was different. She wasn't looking at the camera anymore. She was looking straight at whoever opened the file. At my cousin. At the viewer. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was him. I answered immediately. At first, there was only static. Then I heard a child laughing. Soft, slow, getting closer. Finally, through the noise, I heard my cousin whisper, "She's standing behind me." The call ended. I tried calling him back. Again and again. He never answered. No one has seen him since. So if you ever come across an old hiking video from Taiwan, one showing a family walking through a quiet mountain trail, and someone tells you to pause the footage, to brighten the image, to look closely at the background, don't. Don't freeze the frame. Don't search between the trees. And whatever you do, don't look for the little girl in the red dress, because the moment you find her, she finds you too.